What did Joab end up doing to Abner and why? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse by verse study of the book of 2 Samuel on walking through the Bible.
His word, the glory of his cross.
Today we're going to be discussing 2 Samuel chapter 3 verses 22 to 30, but before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 2 Samuel chapter 3 verse 22. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Samuel chapter 3, beginning of verse 22. At that moment the servants of David and Joab came from a raid and brought much spoil with them. But Abner was not with David in Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. When Joab and all the troops that were with him had come, they told Joab, saying, Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he sent him away, and he has gone in peace. Then Joab came to the king and said, What have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why is it that you sent him away, and he is already gone? Surely you realize that Abner the son of Ner came to deceive you, to know your going out and your coming in, and to know all that you were doing. And when Joab had gone from David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner, who brought him back from the well of Sirah. But David did not know it. Now when Abner had returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gate to speak with him privately, and there stabbed him in the stomach, so that he died, for the blood of Asahel his brother. Afterward, when David heard it, he said, My kingdom and I are guiltless before the Lord forever of the blood of Abner, son of Ner. Let it rest on the head of Joab and on all his father's house, and let there never fail to be in the house of Joab one who has a discharge, or who is a leper, who leans on a staff, or falls by the sword, or who lacks bread. So Joab and Abishai his brother killed Abner, because he had killed their brother Asahel at Gibeon in the battle. Things are changing quickly in Israel. 7.5 years before King Saul was killed at Gilboa by the Philistines, David should have been the rightful king over all Israel, but the northern tribes followed after Saul's son Ishbosheth, a weaker king, for a time. It was only after Abner, Saul's cousin, and the commander of both Saul's and Ishbosheth's army, had a fierce disagreement with Ishbosheth about one of Saul's concubines that Abner changed sides after that argument. And worse for Ishbosheth, Abner had enough sway to bring the northern tribes with him to make David king over all. The days of the reign of Ishbosheth were now numbered, it seemed. But the covenant hadn't formally been made yet, for Abner, after having a feast thrown by David in his honor, had to return to the elders of the other tribes and set up the whole coronation of David as king. Coming to verse 22, we find that all of this was going on while Joab and seemingly Abishai were away on a raid. Where exactly we don't know. They returned with quite a bounty and found the aftermath of a party. Now Abner by that time had left, being sent away by David in peace, but when Joab found out what had happened, Joab was furious. He came to David and basically accused David of being naive, for didn't he know that Abner was there simply to deceive him, when in fact he would return to Ishbosheth and reveal secrets to him that would endanger David and his men? Now we don't get David's response, but from the aftermath I'm sure David told Joab to calm down and to not view Abner as the enemy, but as one who would bring an end to the civil war between the house of Saul and the house of David. Joab, though, wasn't going to be convinced of Abner's intentions, although he didn't express these thoughts to David. Instead, without David's knowledge, Joab sent out men to fetch Abner, who by that time had only made it as far as the well of Sirah, thought to be not too far outside of Hebron. When Abner got to the gate at Hebron, Joab took him aside and stabbed him in the stomach so that he died. The reason given in the text is because Abner had killed Asahel, which we saw in chapter 2. Now under the law of Moses, according to Numbers 35, the next of kin was able to be the avenger of blood against the one who took the life of their relative as long as that person hadn't fled to within the gates of a city of refuge. If a person fled there, then a trial would be held to determine guilt of intentional or unintentional killing. Why is this important to know? Because according to Joshua 20 verse 7, Hebron was appointed a city of refuge, hence why Joab killed him at the gate of the city, and not in the city. But even if Joab thought he was an avenger of blood here, in reality he wasn't, for Abner killed Asahel in the context of war, both of them being soldiers. Now, even though the law of Moses didn't speak about Israel going to war with itself, the rules of war that Israel was to follow would have applied here, not the normal rules observed in peacetime. At the very least, Abner deserved a trial, not death at the hands of a bloodthirsty Joab. But I suggest that there also was another possible reason for Joab killing Abner that is seen through his words to David, which is that Joab sees Abner as a rival and a threat to Joab's place in David's kingdom. So yes, Asahel's death may have been the primary reason for Joab murdering Abner, but there were also secondary reasons that we need to realize were at play as well. When word got back to David about what had happened, he was beyond angry. He made it quite clear to the people that he or his kingdom weren't responsible for Abner's death. Joab was. David was trying to make a peace with the northern tribes, and if word got out that Abner had died by the hands of Joab without any context, it would have been interpreted as being condoned by David as punishment for the treason by Abner of installing Ishbosheth as king. Thus, the civil war might have continued for many years due to Joab's actions. In David's anger, and as judge of God's people, David pronounced a curse on Joab's house and on the house of Joab's father. He said that may it be so that there never was a time when there wasn't someone who had a discharge or was a leper, that which made you unclean under the law of Moses. May there also never be a time when someone in Joab's family wasn't crippled or wasn't poor. That was quite the curse that David pronounced here, calling on God to fulfill it, especially on someone who was from his own family, as Joab was his nephew. Was David right or wrong in pronouncing this curse? The scriptures don't say. But when you read the book of Psalms, you will find psalms of imprecation or curses, some of which were written by David, calling for God to bring calamity upon his enemies. These were always in the context of justice, calling on God to bring judgment on those who had sinned. But they were psalms of imprecation nonetheless. And coming from Israel's king, they carried with it the judgment of the king, the one empowered by God to mete out justice fairly. David spoke this curse in anger, which is always dangerous. But Joab had sinned in killing Abner, so it was not wrong for David to call out for justice by God. On this specific curse, the scriptures don't condone or condemn David for what he did here, so we will leave it at that. When we get to our next New Testament study, this one of the book of Romans, we're going to find Paul telling Christians in Romans 12:14 to bless those who persecute us and not curse them. That doesn't mean that we can't seek out justice or call on God to bring forth justice, but we're to allow those in authority to do so and not curse people ourselves, for our goal is to try to get everyone, including our enemies, to be a Christian. In the case of Joab, Abner was now wanting to be on David's side. Joab should have properly worked things out with Abner instead of killing him. We're going to see this thirst for blood and a lack of apprehension in killing another in Joab in other places in this book. So let's keep this character trait in the back of our minds. Verse 30 tells us that even though Joab probably wielded the knife, that Abishai was in on the plot too, meaning that he was equally as guilty in the death of Abner as Joab was. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Samuel chapter 3, verses 31 to 39, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.